The security guard's hand moved toward his radio as Dr. Angela Williams stepped through the marble entrance of First National Bank's downtown branch. Her designer heels clicked against the polished floor, but the sound was drowned out by whispers and stares from the bank employees behind the counter. She had no idea that in exactly 10 minutes, every single person in that building would be unemployed, and it would be her signature on their termination papers. Angela had built her empire from nothing. 20 years ago, she'd started with a small loan and a dream. Today, she controlled a financial conglomerate worth over $2 billion. But as she approached the teller window, clutching the cashier's check that would seal the biggest acquisition of her career, none of that seemed to matter to the woman behind the glass. "Next," called the teller, her voice sharp and impatient. Angela stepped forward, her presence commanding despite the hostile atmosphere. "Good morning. I need to process this cashier's check." "Hold on." The teller, whose nameplate read Karen Mitchell, barely glanced up from her computer screen. "Do you have an account with us?" "Actually, yes. My company has several accounts here, but this particular transaction..." I said, "Hold on." Karen's eyes finally met Angela's, and her expression hardened. "I need to see 2 forms of ID, and I'll need to verify the authenticity of this check." Angela felt the familiar sting of judgment, but she maintained her composure. She'd faced this before, the assumption that a successful Black woman couldn't possibly belong in spaces of wealth and power. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at the same time, we'll bring you another story of Black people leading the way that you won't want to miss. What Karen didn't know was that Angela's company, Williams Financial Group, had been quietly acquiring shares in First National Bank for the past 6 months. The cashier's check in Angela's hand wasn't just any transaction, it was the final payment that would give her a controlling interest in the entire bank. "This check looks suspicious," Karen announced loudly, holding up the cashier's check for $50 million, as if it were counterfeit currency. "Martha, can you come look at this?" Martha, the branch manager, approached with visible annoyance. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her lips were pressed into a thin line. "What's the problem now, Karen?" "This woman is trying to cash a check for $50 million, Karen said, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Claims she has accounts here, but I've never seen her before." Angela watched the scene unfold with growing disbelief. Around them, other customers began to stare, their conversations dying down as the tension thickened. "Excuse me," Angela said, her voice calm but firm. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Dr. Angela Williams, and this is a legitimate transaction for my company's acquisition." "Ma'am," Martha interrupted, stepping closer with her arms crossed. "We have strict policies about large transactions. Given the circumstances, we're going to need to run additional verification." "Circumstances?" Angela's eyebrow raised. What circumstances would those be? The silence that followed was deafening. Other customers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the undercurrent of discrimination that hung in the air like a dark cloud. Karen and Martha exchanged glances, their prejudice barely concealed behind their professional facades. "Look," Martha said, lowering her voice but not her condescending tone. "We see this kind of thing all the time. People trying to cash fraudulent checks, especially for amounts this large. I'm sure you understand our position." Angela's jaw tightened. She understood perfectly. In their eyes, she was just another Black woman who couldn't possibly have legitimate access to this kind of money. But what they didn't understand was that they were about to learn a very expensive lesson about assumptions. "I want to speak to the regional manager," Angela said quietly. "He's not available," Martha replied dismissively. "And frankly, I don't think he'd tell you anything different. Now, if you'd like to leave your information, we can have someone contact you in a few days about your situation." But Angela was already reaching for her phone, and the smile that crossed her face would have terrified them if they'd been paying attention. "James? It's Angela." Her voice was steady, but anyone who knew her well would recognize the ice beneath the surface. "I need you to execute the final phase of the First National acquisition. Immediately." James Morrison, her chief legal counsel, didn't hesitate. "Are you at the downtown branch? What's happened?" "Let's just say I'm receiving a first-hand demonstration of why this bank needs new management." Angela's eyes never left Martha's face as she spoke. "How long until the paperwork is filed?" "I can have it submitted to the banking commission within the hour." The controlling interest transfer will be official by close of business today. Karen and Martha watched with growing confusion as Angela's demeanor shifted from frustrated customer to commanding executive. Other customers began to notice too, phones appearing as people sensed something dramatic was about to unfold. Perfect, Angela continued. And James? Make sure the termination notices are prepared for the entire downtown branch staff. Effective immediately upon acquisition completion. Martha's face went pale. Excuse me, you can't just… Angela held up a finger, silencing her with a gesture that spoke of years commanding boardrooms. James, I want Linda Patterson flown in from Chicago to take over as interim branch manager. She'll know how to handle the transition properly. Consider it done, James replied. Angela, what exactly did they do? They decided that a black woman couldn't possibly have $50 million legitimately. Angela's voice carried clearly through the suddenly quiet bank. They're about to learn that assumption just cost them their jobs. The security guard, who had been watching from the corner, stepped forward uncertainly. Ma'am, is there a problem here? There's about to be, Angela replied, ending her call. She turned back to Martha and Karen, whose faces now showed the first signs of panic. You wanted to verify this check? Let me help you with that. In exactly, she glanced at her watch, 7 minutes. This bank will be under new ownership, mine. The whispers around the bank grew louder. Customers pulled out phones, some calling friends, others starting to record what was clearly about to become a very public reckoning. You're bluffing, Martha stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. Angela smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Am I? I want everyone to gather around, Angela announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Because you're all about to witness something that doesn't happen every day. The bank had fallen silent, except for the nervous shuffling of feet and the occasional ding of a smartphone notification. Even the customers seemed frozen, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Martha tried to regain control. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. You're disrupting our other customers. Your other customers? Angela laughed, but there was no humor in it. Martha, in about 5 minutes, you won't have any customers to worry about, because you won't work here anymore. Karen, who had been growing increasingly agitated, finally snapped. Look, lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but we've been very patient with you. If you don't leave quietly, we're going to call the police. Please do, Angela said calmly. I'm sure they'd be interested to hear how your bank discriminates against customers based on race. In fact, I hope someone is recording this conversation. Several customers held up their phones, and Angela noticed at least 3 people were live streaming. Perfect. This would be documented from every angle. We are not discriminating, Martha insisted, but her voice was shaking now. We have policies that somehow only apply to black customers with large transactions. Angela interrupted. Tell me, Martha, when was the last time you demanded additional verification from a white customer trying to cash a $50 million check? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Martha's mouth opened and closed without sound, while Karen looked around desperately for support that wasn't coming. I'll tell you what, Angela continued, pulling out her phone again. Let me call someone who can settle this once and for all. Hello, Rebecca? It's Angela Williams. I need you to confirm something for the staff at your downtown branch. Martha's eyes went wide. Rebecca Chen was the bank's current CEO, and Martha had only spoken to her once in her entire career. You don't know Rebecca Chen. Don't I? Angela put the phone on speaker. Rebecca, I'm standing in your downtown branch right now, and your staff is refusing to process a cashier's check for $50 million. They seem to think it's fraudulent. Oh my God, came Rebecca's voice through the speaker, panic evident even through the phone. Angela, I am so sorry. Is this about the acquisition? I thought you were handling that through corporate. The blood drained from Martha's face. Around the bank, customers began to murmur with excitement, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. I decided to handle it personally, Angela replied, which has been educational. But the real shock was still coming. Rebecca, Angela continued, her voice carrying clearly through the silent bank. I want you to explain to your staff exactly who I am and what's happening here today. Rebecca's voice came through the speaker. tight with embarrassment. "Staff of Downtown Branch, I need you to understand that Dr. Angela Williams is not just any customer. She's the CEO of Williams Financial Group. And there was a pause. As of 10 minutes ago, she owns controlling interest in First National Bank." The silence that followed was deafening. Martha's face went from pale to gray, while Karen actually stumbled backward, catching herself against the counter. Around the bank, customers began to gasp and whisper excitedly. "That's impossible," Martha whispered. "Is it?" Angela asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Rebecca, please explain to Martha how impossible it is. Dr. Williams has been acquiring our stock for months," Rebecca's voice continued through the speaker. "The board approved the final transaction this morning. She is now the majority owner of First National Bank, which means she's effectively my boss and yours." Angela watched with satisfaction as the full weight of the situation settled on the bank staff. The security guard, who had been edging closer, now stood frozen in place. The tellers behind the counter were staring with open mouths. "Now," Angela said, pocketing her phone, "let's discuss that cashier's check you found." So suspicious. She placed the check on the counter again, smoothing it out carefully. "This $50 million is the final payment for my acquisition of this bank. It's drawn on Goldman Sachs, verified by 3 independent accounting firms, and approved by the Federal Reserve. But you rejected it because you couldn't believe a black woman might legitimately have access to this kind of money." Martha tried to speak, but no words came out. Karen had gone completely white, her hands shaking as she stared at the check. "You know what the really sad part is?" Angela continued. "I actually came in here planning to keep most of the staff. I believe in second chances, in helping people grow and learn. But what I experienced today, that level of discrimination, that's not something I can overlook." She pulled out her phone again, but this time she dialed a different number. "James? Yes. Go ahead with the termination notices. Everyone in the downtown branch, effective immediately." "Wait." Martha finally found her voice. "Please, I have a mortgage, 2 kids in college. I can't lose this job." Angela's expression softened slightly, but her resolve didn't waver. "You should have thought about that before you decided to judge me by my skin color instead of treating me with basic respect." But Martha wasn't ready to give up yet. And what she said next would make everything worse. "This isn't about race." Martha's voice cracked as desperation took hold. "This is about protocol. We have procedures for large transactions, and I was just following them." Angela's expression hardened. "Really? So you follow these same procedures for every customer who comes in with a large check?" "Of course we do." "Then you won't mind if I review your transaction logs for the past 6 months," Angela said calmly. "I'm sure we'll find plenty of examples of white customers receiving the same level of scrutiny for large transactions." Martha's face flushed red. "You can't just, I can do whatever I want? I own this bank." Angela's voice carried a finality that made everyone in the building uncomfortable. "In fact, let me make a call right now to have those records pulled." She dialed another number. "Linda, it's Angela. I need you to remote access the downtown branch system and pull up all transactions over $10,000 for the past 6 months. Pay special attention to any that required additional verification." While Angela spoke, Karen leaned over to whisper frantically to Martha. "What are we gonna do? My husband just lost his job last month. We can't afford for me to lose mine too." "I know," Martha whispered back, her voice breaking. "I'm going to try to fix this." Angela ended her call and turned back to them. "Linda will have those records within the hour. But I think we both know what she's gonna find, don't we, Martha?" "Please," Martha said, her professional facade crumbling completely. "I admit I made a mistake. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment. But I'm not a bad person. I've worked here for 15 years. I've helped thousands of customers. This one mistake shouldn't define my entire career." For a moment, Angela's expression softened. Around the bank, customers watched with bated breath, sensing this was the crucial moment where mercy might prevail over justice. "You're right," Angela said quietly. "One mistake shouldn't define your entire career. But this wasn't just a mistake, Martha. This was a choice. You chose to see my skin color before you saw my humanity. You chose to assume I was a criminal instead of a customer. And worst of all, you chose to double down on that assumption even when I tried to explain. She stepped closer to the counter, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But you know what? I'm gonna give you one chance to save your job. One chance to show me that you've learned something from this experience. Martha's eyes filled with hope. Anything. What do you need me to do? Tell me the truth, Angela said simply. Tell me exactly what you were thinking when you saw me walk through that door. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Martha looked around the bank, at the faces watching her, at the phones recording everything. She could lie, try to save face, maintain her dignity. Or she could tell the truth, and maybe, just maybe, save her career. What she chose to say next would determine not just her future, but the future of everyone in that bank. Martha's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter. The entire bank held its breath, waiting for her answer. Angela stood perfectly still, her eyes never leaving Martha's face. Martha began, then stopped. She looked around the bank again, at the customers with their phones out, at her coworkers who were depending on her to somehow fix this situation. I thought you were trouble. Trouble? Angela's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath. I saw you walking in, and I thought you looked like someone who might be trying to scam us. Martha's voice was barely audible now. I've been robbed twice in my career. Both times it was young black men. And I know that's not fair, I know that's not right. But when I saw you with that check, you assumed I was a criminal, Angela finished for her. Yes. The word came out as a whisper. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I let my fear and my prejudice override my professionalism. I treated you like a threat instead of a customer. And that was wrong. Angela nodded slowly. Around the bank, customers began to murmur. Some seemed moved by Martha's honesty. Others appeared disgusted by the admission. Thank you for being honest, Angela said. That took courage. Martha's face lit up with hope. Does that mean? It means you're fired. The words hit Martha like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her face crumpling. But I told the truth. I apologized. You did, Angela agreed. And I appreciate that. But Martha, you just admitted that you profile customers based on their race. You admitted that you let your personal biases affect how you do your job. That's not just wrong. It's illegal, and it's exactly the kind of thinking that I refuse to tolerate in my bank. She turned to address the entire branch staff, who had been watching in stunned silence. Let me be clear about something. I'm not firing you all because I'm angry or because I want revenge. I'm firing you because you represent a culture of discrimination that has no place in a modern financial institution. Karen, who had been silent through Martha's confession, finally spoke up. But I didn't do anything. I was just following Martha's lead. Exactly, Angela replied. You stood there and watched your manager discriminate against a customer, and you said nothing. You participated in it. In my book, that makes you just as guilty. She walked over to the security guard, who had been trying to make himself invisible in the corner. And you? What's your name? Marcus, he replied quietly. Marcus Johnson. Marcus, what did you think when you saw me walk in here? Marcus looked around nervously. I thought you might be here to cause trouble. Why? Because… Marcus hesitated, then squared his shoulders. Because I've been trained to be suspicious of anyone who doesn't look like they belong. And I'm ashamed to say that I looked at you and didn't think you belonged in a place like this. Angela studied his face carefully. Unlike Martha, there was genuine remorse in his eyes, not just fear of consequences. Marcus, you're the only one who's keeping his job. The downtown branch of First National Bank had never been so quiet. Martha was crying quietly at her desk, clearing out her personal items. Karen had left without a word, her face stone cold with anger. The other tellers moved like ghosts, packing up their workstations with the stunned silence of people who couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Marcus stood near the entrance, still processing the fact that he was the only employee who would be returning to work tomorrow. Ma'am, he said to Angela, I don't understand. Why am I staying when everyone else is going? Angela looked at him thoughtfully. Because you were honest without being asked. You admitted your mistake and took responsibility for it. That tells me you have the character to change and grow." She turned to address the customers who were still in the bank, many of whom were filming everything with their phones. "I want all of you to understand something. What happened here today isn't just about one bank or one group of employees. This is about the systemic discrimination that Black people face every single day in America. We go into stores and we're followed by security. We try to rent apartments and suddenly they're no longer available. We apply for loans and somehow our credit isn't quite good enough. And when we walk into banks with legitimate business, we're treated like criminals." Her voice grew stronger, more passionate. "I didn't buy this bank to make a point. I bought it because it's a good investment. But what happened here today has reminded me that with power comes responsibility. And I have a responsibility to make sure that no one else ever has to go through what I went through here." Martha approached hesitantly, her box of personal items in her arms. "Dr. Williams, I want you to know that I'm going to do everything I can to learn from this. I'm going to take sensitivity training. I'm going to volunteer in community organizations. I'm going to be better." Angela nodded. "I hope you do, Martha. I really do. But you'll be doing it somewhere else." As Martha left, several customers approached Angela. "That was incredible," said an elderly Black woman who had been waiting in line. "I've been banking here for 20 years, and I've felt unwelcome every single time. Thank you for standing up for all of us." A young white man stepped forward. "I recorded the whole thing. Do you want me to post it online?" Angela considered this. "Yes, but I want you to include something in your post. I want you to tell people that this isn't about revenge or anger. This is about accountability. When we tolerate discrimination, we enable it. When we stay silent in the face of injustice, we become complicit in it." She looked around the nearly empty bank. "Tomorrow, this branch will reopen under new management. Linda Patterson, one of the finest banking professionals I know, will be running things. And the first thing she's going to do is implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all new hires. But more importantly," Angela continued, "we're going to change how we evaluate customers. No more assumptions based on appearance. No more profiling based on race or class. Every customer will be treated with dignity and respect." As she prepared to leave, Angela caught sight of her reflection in the bank's glass doors. She saw a powerful Black woman who had just changed an entire institution with nothing but her determination and her checkbook. But she also saw something else, a reminder that true change doesn't happen in boardrooms or courtrooms. It happens in moments like this, when people choose to stand up and say enough. She walked out of the bank, her head held high, knowing that she had done more than just acquire a new business. She had sent a message that would ripple far beyond the walls of one downtown bank branch. The age of discrimination wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, it had a formidable opponent with the power to fight back. And that was just the beginning.